Where is the runway? Unraveling the mystery of Turkish cargo flight 6491. Opening scene. A cold, eerie silence filled the control room at Bishkek's Manas International Airport. Thick fog hung like a ghostly curtain over the airfield, blanketing everything in a dull, unrelenting gray. The air traffic controller, Dostan, rubbed his temples as he squinted at the radar screen. A faint blip moved steadily toward the airport, a cargo plane on its final approach. Turkish cargo 6491. This is Manas Tower. Confirm visual of the runway, Dostan said, his voice laced with tension. Static crackled through the radio before the captain's voice responded. Negative, Manas Tower. We've got zero visibility down here. Instruments only. Dostan's heart raced. He glanced outside the tower window, barely able to see the red blinking lights of the runway through the mist. He checked the radar again. Flight 6491 was aligned perfectly. It was supposed to be a routine landing, but something about tonight felt off. Proceed as planned. You're cleared to land, he said, forcing calm into his voice. Roger that. Turkish cargo 6491 descending, came the reply. Inside the cockpit, Captain Orhan and First Officer Semel focused intensely on their instruments. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as the plane began its descent. Semel, the younger of the two, couldn't shake the unease creeping into his chest. This fog is worse than we anticipated, Semel muttered. We've trained for this. Trust the instruments, Orhan replied, his tone firm. As the aircraft broke through the cloud layer, Orhan squinted, expecting to see the familiar lights of the runway below. Instead, there was nothing. Just an endless sea of gray. Where's the runway? Semel blurted, his voice rising in panic. Orhan tightened his grip on the controls. Manas Tower, Turkish cargo 6491. We don't have the runway in sight. Repeat, no visual on the runway. Back in the tower, Dostan froze. The radar showed the plane exactly where it should be, right above the airfield. But the captain's voice told a different story. 6491, you're directly above the runway. Are your systems malfunctioning? No malfunction. There's no runway. Orhan shouted, his voice cutting through the static. And then, the unthinkable happened. The radar blip disappeared. The next morning, the world woke to the shocking news. Turkish cargo flight 6491 had vanished during its landing approach. Rescue teams scoured the surrounding area, but there was no sign of the aircraft. It was as if the plane had been swallowed by the fog. Among those called to investigate the mysterious disappearance was Leyla Arslan, a seasoned aviation safety investigator from Istanbul. With years of experience solving aviation mysteries, Leyla was known for her sharp intuition and relentless determination. As she arrived at the fog-covered airfield, Leyla immediately sensed the tension in the air. The control tower staff looked shaken, and whispers of supernatural theories floated among the ground crew. Leyla, said Yusuf, her assistant, as he handed her a file of preliminary reports. No debris, no wreckage, nothing. It's like the plane just vanished. Leyla frowned. Planes don't just disappear, Yusuf. There's always an explanation. Let's start with the radar data and the ATC recordings. Hours later, Leyla sat in the control room, replaying the final moments of Flight 6491. The desperation in Captain Orhan's voice sent chills down her spine. What do you think happened? Yusuf asked, breaking the silence. Leyla leaned back, her mind racing. If the radar shows the plane over the runway, but the pilots couldn't see it, then either the instruments were compromised or something interfered with their perception. Interfered? Like what? Yusuf asked nervously. I don't know yet, Leyla admitted. The breakthrough came 2 days later when a shepherd from a nearby village reported seeing a massive shadow in the fog the night of the incident. Following the lead, Leyla and Yusuf drove into the desolate hills surrounding the airport. As they climbed higher, the fog thickened, and Layla's unease grew. It doesn't make sense, she muttered. If the plane crashed, there should have been an explosion or a fire. They reached a clearing where the shepherd had last seen the shadow. What they found there made Layla's blood run cold. Deep gouges in the earth formed two parallel lines, as if something massive had skidded across the ground. The marks stretched for nearly a kilometer before abruptly stopping. There was no wreckage, no signs of fire, just an eerie silence. "It's like it took off again," Yusuf whispered. Layla crouched by the marks, running her fingers over the disturbed soil. Or something moved it. Back in the city, Layla dove into the airport's history, searching for anything unusual. She discovered a chilling pattern. Over the past 20 years, 5 other planes had reported navigation anomalies while approaching Manus during heavy fog. None of those incidents had resulted in crashes, but the pilots had described the same disorienting sensation of the runway disappearing. Determined to uncover the truth, Layla convinced Dostan to allow her access to the airport's radar system during another foggy night. As the mist rolled in, she monitored the equipment closely. "Anything unusual?" Yusuf asked, standing behind her. "Not yet," Layla replied, her eyes glued to the screen. Suddenly, the radar flickered, and a new blip appeared, a large object moving slowly above the airfield. "What is that?" Yusuf exclaimed. Layla's heart pounded. "It's not a plane. It's too slow and too low." The radar flickered again, and the object vanished. Layla and Yusuf raced to the airfield, where the fog was thicker than ever. As they approached the runway, they heard a low, humming noise that seemed to vibrate through their bones. "What is that?" Yusuf shouted over the sound. Layla didn't answer. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the runway. The humming grew louder, and then she saw it, a massive, shadowy shape hovering above the ground. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen, its surface glistening as if covered in liquid metal. "Yusuf, get back to the car," Layla yelled, but it was too late. The object emitted a blinding flash of light, and when Layla opened her eyes, it was gone. Gasping, she looked around. The fog had lifted, and the runway was visible again. But there, at the far end of the airfield, was a sight that made her knees buckle. The missing cargo plane sat intact, its engines silent, its cargo doors wide open. Investigators were baffled when they examined the recovered plane. The cargo was untouched, and the flight data recorder showed no signs of malfunction. Yet the crew was nowhere to be found. Layla stared at the aircraft, her mind racing. She couldn't explain what she had seen or what had happened to the crew. As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that the mystery wasn't over. Somewhere in the fog, something was still watching, something that didn't belong to this world. And it was only a matter of